It is just a huge honor today to have Allison Hurtado come on the show. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an honor. Allison Hurtado is the Community Outreach Specialist for CASA of Arizona, a program of the Arizona Supreme Court. She provides tools and guidance to all the county CASA programs in Arizona to help with their outreach and recruitment efforts. Allison has a journalism degree from Arizona State University, and prior to holding this position, she was a reporter for the Ahwatukee Foothills News from 2010 to 2015, covering everything from local crime and government to schools and community events. Her favorite stories to tell were those of lives being changed through the kindness of others, which made the transition to the CASA program a natural fit. Children in foster care have a special place in her heart, as Allison has been an aunt to dozens of foster children over the last 8 years. 3 have been successfully adopted by her sister and brother-in-law. Allison and her husband recently became licensed foster parents as well, and have enthusiastic support for their 2 biological daughters to take on this new adventure. Wow, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of people, the first thing out of their mouth is, what is CASA?
Yeah, CASA stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocates. It's a long way of saying we speak for children in foster care. All CASAs are volunteers. They are trained by us at the Supreme Court, and then they take on this role of being an advocate for a child in foster care. They're appointed by a judge to a case. They go out and visit the children on that case and get to know them really well. And then they take all the information that they gather and put it in a report that goes to the judge, so the judge knows what's going on in that case.
And CASA means house in Spanish, right?
It does. That gets a little confusing in Arizona.
Yeah, I thought house. That was the first thing I thought, it's house. So this is a program from the Arizona Supreme Court.
It is.
So
yeah.
you actually work for the Arizona Supreme Court?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, that'll come in handy if you ever get arrested for anything, right?
Yeah, probably not.
You'll know all the players, right? Yeah. So first of all, how does a child end up in foster care? What's usually going on to where?
It can be a number of ways. The most typical way in Arizona is neglect. Neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, those are the main categories that children are lumped into when they come into care. But basically, it's any time that their parents are not able to care for them. And when the Department of Child Safety has to step in and remove those children from the home is when we get involved.
So I'm just curious, like, what's the population of Arizona, and how many foster kids are there, and what's Arizona's population?
You know, I'm not sure the population.
Ryan, can you Google the population of Arizona? Do you know the population of foster kids?
Yes, there's just under 17,000 children in foster care in Arizona.
17,000.
6.9 million, so 7 million.
So there's 7 million people in Arizona and 17,000 foster children. Mm-hmm. So is that a lot or a little?
It's a lot. Our population of kids in foster care has actually been going up since 2005. Hit a peak at the beginning of 2016 and has been going down since then. So we're feeling positive that the numbers are going down, but it's still very high.
And what do you think makes it go up, and what do you think is making it go down? What do you think makes it go up or down?
You know, it's a number of things. Most likely it's a lot of substance abuse issues.
Yeah.
A lot of the opioid epidemic is kind of nationwide right now.
I read in the Arizona Republic, or it might have been the Tribune, that the 3 most common variables for everyone in prison is didn't finish high school, has substance abuse issue, and lives below the poverty line.
Yeah.
Are those 3 variables highly correlated to 17,000 kids in foster care?
Absolutely, yeah. A large percentage of them come from poverty, although child abuse is everywhere. And substance abuse is probably 90% of the cases have some substance abuse involved.
And what usually is the substance abuse? What is the usual substance?
Like I said, there's the opioids are really big right now.
Which leads to depression.
Yes.
When you start getting on opioids, you actually start having depression.
Yeah, and opioids lead to heroin, which is very common in Arizona.
So opioids, heroin, what other substance abuse?
You know, alcohol is a big thing.
Alcohol.
But really any of those.
Well, the reason I was asking is because my oldest son is older than you. So you're on nothing with my child, but one thing I never saw coming when I was your age was that someday marijuana would be legal. Mm-hmm. And now Ahwatukee just got its first marijuana medical, what's it called?
Dispensary.
Right? Dispensary. Mm-hmm. Ryan, what's that medical marijuana dispensary called?
Sunflower.
Sunflower. You said opioids and alcohol. Do you think marijuana is a contributor to that, or is that not as an issue?
I'm sure it is. It's just not something that we see broken down on reports from the Department of Child Safety. So I couldn't say for sure.
So basically, opioids and alcohol. Now, I don't mean to be narrow-minded, but when I think of this for the whole state, but what is it? What is going on in Ahwatukee with this? I mean, is this an issue in Ahwatukee as opposed to Tempe, Chandler, Phoenix?
It is. It's probably more of an issue elsewhere, but yes, there's still those problems even in Ahwatukee.
Yeah, I think it's funny how many parents have said to me over the last 30 years, well, I'm just glad there's no drugs in Ahwatukee. And the next patient would be a police officer, and I'd say, tell her what Mary said, and he'd say, are you kidding me? Who do you think has more money to buy drugs? A rich kid in Desert Vista or Mountain Point, or some poor kid in the poorest high school?
Yeah.
He said there's actually, he said he thinks there's more drugs where there's rich kids in Ahwatukee and North Scottsdale and what's the real rich one? Paradise Valley. He said those kids have all the money. They buy any drug they want. So
it could just be they're better at covering it up. I was a crime reporter for Ahwatukee Foothills News, and there wasn't a ton of big crime in Ahwatukee, but definitely you see those drugs around the high schools a lot.
Yeah. So what do you do? Do you like your job? Do you like what you're doing?
I love my job. It's fantastic. I get to meet these amazing volunteers who are dedicating so much time to getting to know these kids that are in really difficult situations, and they're changing lives, and that's amazing to see.
That's amazing that there's people like you who find that purposeful and your passion. That's just so, it's people like you who are pillars of community by giving beyond themselves, sharing, making a difference. So you became a foster parent.
I did.
You already had 2 biological daughters, and then you and your husband decided to what? Practice what you preach?
Yeah, exactly. My sister had been a foster parent for a long time, so it was near and dear to my heart. When I started this job, I was so excited to finally be able to do something because, my husband wasn't fully on board with fostering at the time because, that's a big commitment.
Well, 2 kids is already a big commitment.
Right, we had 2 kids, and so we were kind of, our hands were full, but, the more that I get involved in the system, the more that I meet these kids, the more that I interact with what's going on in foster care, the more you have to do more. And so we decided to bring a kid into our home, and it's been going really, really well.
When I was little, I never heard of foster care growing up in Kansas. I lived there the first 24 years. If you couldn't handle your child or you were in over your head, you just gave it up for adoption. Right. What's the difference in just giving your child up for adoption or going into foster care?
Well, the goal of foster care is to get those children back to their parents. Typically, these parents don't want their children to be taken away in the first place. So it's really about providing them services and help to get them healthy enough to take their children back into their own care. So foster care is meant to be temporary. It's not meant to be a forever thing like adoption is. Sometimes it does lead to that, and that can be a good thing for those kids, or it can be a really heartbreaking thing. But the goal of foster care is to reunify with their families.
And why is it sometimes a heartbreaking thing when you get a child adopted?
Children love their parents. That's just biologically
Ryan, do you hear that?
Hardwired into
you hear that,
us.
Ryan? You're supposed to love your parents. I believe it's the 4th commandment. And so
even
parents. Do you think it's a biological thing that even though your mom and dad aren't doing right and they're drunk and they're crazy, they just still biologically love their parents? Do you think it's an innate?
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
Kids crave that attention and that approval from their parents, and it's tough when their parents aren't healthy enough to give that.
Yeah. Like, I'm the only normal person in my family, but I still love my mom and all my sisters. No, I'm just kidding. How many, if someone's listening to this and saying, I believe the last I read is that if you're a baby boomer, 1 in 4 decided not to have kids. So at the end of World War II, Americans were having 5 kids per family, and they were starting at about 16. Mm-hmm. Now, 65 years later, they're starting about 10 years later. Instead of 16, they're about 26. Yeah. And instead of having 5 kids, they're having about 2.5. But a quarter of them never had a kid. They just had dogs and cats instead. But if someone's listening out there and saying, I think I want to do this, what's the process like? What do they do?
Well, the process to become a CASA advocate is very different than becoming a foster parent. Foster parenting is taking that child into your home full time, round the clock, and being a parent for them. A CASA advocate is a volunteer. They're a little bit like a mentor, but we take it to the next step by making them an advocate as well. So the process to become a CASA advocate is to apply online on our website.
And you got the greatest football coach in the world on there.
We do.
You recognize that man?
Yes. He's our big statewide spokesperson right now.
And how do you get Bruce Arians to be your statewide spokesperson?
His wife was actually a CASA, and she's been a CASA in a few states, and so it's a cause that she is super passionate about, and so she's transferred that over to him as well. They are constantly out in the community talking about CASA, raising money for our support organization that supports our volunteers with training and with recruitment efforts. So they're just a fantastic partner for us.
Nice. Good on Bruce Arians.
Yeah.
And what's his wife's name?
Christine Arians.
Christine Arians. That is amazing.
So the Arians family.
I'll think of that the next time they lose the ball game.
Yeah.
I'll think, well, he's still a CASA
At least he's
advocate.
doing something for children.
Yeah.
That's right.
But so what is a CASA advocate?
So a CASA advocate is an everyday community volunteer who is dedicating their time to getting to know a child in foster care and being an advocate for them.
So that's not necessarily that child living with you?
It is not. It's going out and visiting that child.
And where would that child be living? In a foster
home, in a group home, in a residential treatment center. They could be placed anywhere.
So it's kind of like, is it kind of like the old Big Brothers, Big Sisters?
It's similar to that. Then we just take it that next step further by giving them this position within the court where they can go directly to the judge and say,
Really?
hey, this child isn't getting the services they need. This child needs tutoring. This child needs glasses. And they have that power to really affect change in the case.
And these are volunteers. It's not a paid position.
It is not a paid position.
And Phoenix is actually the capital of Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
So if you live in Ahwatukee, the Arizona Supreme Court's just right here in Phoenix.
It is. It's right in downtown Phoenix. Yep.
Yeah. Where I almost got killed the last time I went there. I actually did. You know how?
Oh.
Well, I'm always in Ahwatukee. I never leave Ahwatukee. The only time I leave Ahwatukee is to go to the airport. Because I can do everything in Ahwatukee. The only thing it doesn't have is a Walmart. But I was downtown for something else, and they have that new rail, that new train. And I'm walking around, looking at all the buildings, and all of a sudden somebody just grabbed me and ripped me back, and I'm like, I didn't know what was happening. This train went, phew. And I was like shaking. That guy said to me, he goes, dude, you almost got killed. Dude, you saved my life, and that scared the crap out of me. So if you're a tourist from Ahwatukee walking around like a moron, like that, I imagine the criminals all know who's a tourist in Manhattan because everybody else probably just walking to the subway. You're the one taking selfies of the. It's very beautiful downtown.
It is.
From 30 years ago. I only go down there for like a basketball game or something. But man, when I go down there, it's come a long way in 30 years.
Yeah, it is very beautiful.
And it's also the largest, most populous capital. So Phoenix is the highest population capital of all 50 states. No state has a capital with as many people in Phoenix. So if they wanted to be a CASA advocate, they would go down to the Arizona Supreme Court, or they would first go to CASAofarizona.org.
Yes.
And then they would go down to the Arizona Supreme Court, or what would
They'd
they do?
actually go to the Maricopa County Superior Court. So it starts with an online application, and then our staff would give them a call and invite them down for an interview. We have a really thorough process to become a CASA advocate, because obviously these people are working with kids who've been through enough already. But it starts with an interview. They do a polygraph exam.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Wow. Because they are vulnerable.
Absolutely,
If
yeah.
you let a shyster through there, yeah.
Yeah, so they do a polygraph exam, they do fingerprints, the whole 9 yards, and then we give them about 30 hours of training before they take on their first case.
Wow. And you said the whole 9 yards. You know where that saying comes from? The whole 9 yards?
Football?
No, it was in World War II. The 9 yards was the belt of bullets. So if your machine gun went through all the bullets, you went through the whole 9 yards. But so you go down there, and who usually is an advocate? Is it a retiree person? Is it a weekend warrior?
About 40% of them are retired.
40% retired.
About 40% still work full time. So it is something that they do in the evenings or on the weekends. Typically, we find people with, more flexible job schedules tend to enjoy it
And
more.
they how often would they usually visit this child?
Twice a month.
Twice a month.
So that can be done in the evening or on the weekends.
So are they technically a registered employee of the state, just an unpaid position, or are they licensed from the
They're
state?
certified by the state,
Certified by the
by the Arizona Supreme Court.
certified by the Arizona Supreme Court. That is just really cool.
It's really cool. I mean, they're given a court order to go out and visit these children and get to know them.
Is it a dangerous volunteer job? I mean, do people?
No, I mean, you do have to be smart about it. But we have professional staff who are going to coach you along every step of the way and make sure you're not in a dangerous position. We definitely want our volunteers to be safe, but they go out, they get to know these kids, they get to know what's going on in their lives, and
So what's an average visit like? Like, what do they usually do on an average visit?
normally when they go out and visit a child, it's just to do something fun to get to know the kids. So they might, go down to the park and play basketball or football or soccer or something, or they might take them out to McDonald's and get a burger with them. Just something casual like that. But they do a lot behind the scenes as well. They spend a lot of time emailing case managers and doctors and therapists and anyone who's involved with that case to really get the full story of what's going on with that kid.
That is amazing. I've lived in Arizona for 30 years, and I wasn't aware of any of this. That's
It's
why
a
I was so
very
excited to get you on the
well-kept
show.
secret.
It
Yeah.
is a well-kept secret. So how many? So Arizona's got 7 million people, 17,000 foster care. How many CASA advocates do you have certified by
We've
the
got
Arizona
just
Supreme
over
Court?
1,000 statewide.
1,000 statewide. So right now, each caseworker, that's one caseworker for every 17 kids.
And that's not how we do it. These are volunteers.
Yeah.
And the benefit of having a volunteer is they focus on one case at a time.
Yeah.
So we're only able to serve about 10% of kids in care right now.
So you need a lot of people in Ahwatukee.
Absolutely.
Come on, Ahwatukee. How many are you going to recruit today?
Thinking 50.
50?
is what we're going for.
That is cool. And how many foster kids? Do you know how many foster kids actually live in Ahwatukee?
I'm not sure how many are in Ahwatukee. There's about 10,000 in Maricopa County.
10,000 in Maricopa County. Wow. And do you know any foster? Do you know any CASA advocates from Ahwatukee?
Yeah, we have a bunch from Ahwatukee.
Really?
Yeah.
And what do they say about it? How long have they been doing it? And what do they say? Is this?
They come from all over. So, some have been doing it for a couple months and some have been doing it for 10 years or more. But it's definitely a life-changing opportunity to really get to know this kid and then have the chance to do something for them that's really going to impact their life. It's very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, most people, when they're 70, 80 years old, you say, look back in your life and who really, what made your influence? And it was a teacher or a coach or a volunteer or a scoutmaster. I mean, it's that can really be a big part of your life to be able to help someone or be a force for good or when that. So how old is the average foster kid?
The average foster kid would probably be right around 8 years old. About 30 to 40% are actually under the age of 5.
30 to 40, under 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then the average would probably be, then the mean, the mode would probably be about 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
But our advocates serve kids, 0 to 18.
0 to 18.
Mm-hmm.
And then 18, that's when you're a legal licensed adult.
Right, and that's when, foster care ends. They can sign up for a program that actually gives them services till they're 21, but our advocates would end the case at 18.
Okay, so then the next step would be, what if you became a foster parent? How do you become a foster parent? Is that the same thing? You got to go to the court and get...
It's similar. Actually, our process to become a CASA advocate is more thorough, I believe, than becoming a foster parent. Foster parents, go to an orientation in Maricopa County. They have them 2-3 times a month, and then you choose an agency to go through. That agency will guide you the rest of the way to get licensed through the 30 hours of classes, the background checks and interviews and things like that.
Yeah. And do you guys oftentimes, this is a state program, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you mentor from other states, or do sometimes you see, well, how are they doing it in Nebraska and Oklahoma and Michigan?
Yeah,
or
the CASA program is nationwide.
Oh, it is nationwide.
Yes. So we have our program here in Arizona. It's actually very different from other states, but we all do the same thing. We just set it up in a different way. Because our program is through the courts. Most CASA programs in other states are nonprofit organizations.
A nonprofit organization. Is that what you call an NGO? I see that term in the newspaper. They'll say sometimes they'll say it's a nonprofit, and sometimes they'll say it's an NGO.
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, I see that term. Ryan, Google that. What is an NGO? A non-governmental organization. So I guess it'd be like the Red Cross or whatever. So what can you take it away? What can you do to talk? Our goal is to get 50 people listening to be a CASA advocate. What, talk to them. Why? What do you think would make them do it? Want to do it? Why should they get involved? Why did you do it?
Well, I did it because I had, this heart for kids in foster care. I've seen my sister bring these kids into her home, and I've seen them really struggle to find a case plan that was going to work for these kids. Her goal in becoming a foster parent was to adopt. And so they've always taken in young kids wanting to adopt them. And it's heartbreaking when these kids come into her home, they've been abused or neglected, and then to see them go through this long, drawn-out court process and end up, back with those parents who neglected them, or going off to some other foster home where you don't really know where they're going to end up, that's heartbreaking. I think what really convinces people to get involved is the stories that you hear. So I've been blessed to be able to get to know some CASA advocates who have some amazing stories. I'll tell you about one who was an advocate many, many years ago, and she said her most memorable case was of a teenage boy she was assigned to, and he at the time was living in a residential treatment center. It was kind of a hospital setting because this boy had just had so many disruptive behaviors that foster parents didn't want him. So he was in this hospital setting. She'd go and visit him every couple weeks, and she just wasn't really making a connection. Finally, one day she asked him, okay, what can I do to make this better for you? Because that's the goal of an advocate, is to make the situation better in some way. And he said, I really don't like my shoes. He was living in this setting where they took away all of their street clothes, just left them with their shoes and a hospital gown. And as they worked their way through this program, they earned back their street clothes until they got to leave. And so all he had was his shoes, and he didn't like them. And she thought, well, that's easy. I can get you some new shoes. So she called up his case manager, got the funding approved, whatever, went out and got him shoes and brought him back the next day. And he was grateful. He said, thank you. And then he said, I want to show you something in my room. So she followed him back to his room. And in this place where he was living, there were no doors on any of the rooms. There was a nurse's station in the center of the building so that they could keep an eye on the kids at all times. So he got back to his room. He turned his back to the nurse's station. He reached under the mattress and pulled out a piece of glass and put it in her hand and said, I don't need this anymore. So this kid had been living in this situation where he was watched all the time, and yet he was finding a way to hurt himself because he was that depressed about where he was and what was going on. And just because she consistently went out there and visited him and talked with him and did the simple thing that he asked her to do, she was able to make an impact on him. I'll tell you one more if I can.
Well, that was an interesting, one of my favorite quotes. I forgot who said it and how it goes, but something like, it's easier to raise children than it is to repair broken men. Mm-hmm. Do you remember how that quote goes?
Yeah.
And society doesn't realize that, if some kid comes out at 18 completely broken, mm-hmm. that's hard, if not impossible to fix.
Absolutely.
And society needs to focus more on the children, mm-hmm. because it's very hard, if not impossible, to repair broken men.
Yeah. I, as a foster parent, have seen it with our own child who's in our house. In 6 months that he's been living with us, there have been dozens of people in and out of his life that, are working for the system, are trying to do the best for him, but they're being paid to be there. They have a certain role that they're there to fill, and they miss things. And then there's turnover because this is their job, and sometimes they move on to other jobs. So that's why a CASA advocate is really valuable. They're not paid to be there. They're there because they want to make a difference for the child. And they show up consistently so that that child knows who they are and knows that they can trust them. And that's what a CASA does, is they get to know those kids and then they speak up for them.
What a neat hobby, because it seems like the number one complaint in Ahwatukee is, I'm bored. You know, when you're raising kids, there's nothing to do. Mm-hmm. I'm bored. And, you know, a lot of times, like today you're asking me, so what are you going to do the weekend? No, I'm a loser. I don't do anything. Where are you going to go out Friday night and go dancing? No, I don't do anything. I'm boring. And here's a chance, like, okay, if you don't have a hobby, how many men do you know? You say, well, do you have a hobby? I mean, your grandfather made wood bowls on a lathe. Your mother had a garden. What is your hobby? You know, I don't have a hobby. This would be an awesome, amazing hobby. Absolutely. For that guy who's been complaining in the dental office for 30 years that you have nothing to do and you're bored and you don't have. And a lot of people, I see it with, when you said 40% of retirees, I see that because there's two groups of retirees that come in. You know, they retire usually from Canada, Michigan, North Dakota, up north, and they come down. And some are just like they're in Disneyland. They're at the Ahwatukee Foothills Center, and they sign up for yoga and all these things. And then there's those workaholics where they just worked all day, every day from
and then they
birth
retire
to 65.
And think, what am I going to do now?
I know, and they say, I'll tell you what, retirement's not cracked up to what it be. I'd rather be back in Iowa working. Tell you the truth, it's very boring.
Yeah.
Well, dude, if you're bored, I mean, it's one thing to go golfing. Golfing's fun if you're doing it with 2 or 3 of your buddies. If you're in a group,
right.
You know, if you're bored. Go to the Ahwatukee Rec Center. If you're bored, go make a difference in someone's life. Be some kid's Vince Lombardi. Or I should have said Bruce Arians. Why did I say Vince Lombardi? How rude of me. Bruce Arians is on the damn deal, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer. Do you think so?
Yeah, I think so.
I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
But yeah, be some kid's Bruce Arians.
You know, I have met advocates
and tell us your other story.
You know, have looked for volunteer opportunities, and there are plenty of places to go mentor a child, you know, get to know them and do fun things with them. This takes it that step further. There's the administrative side as well, where you're reporting back to that judge, giving them valuable information they can use to make decisions for this child. So I'll tell you my one other story. I was an advocate who was assigned to an 8-year-old boy, and he went out the first time. He thought, you know, I'm going to see how this kid's doing in school. So he decided to go visit him at the school. He showed up, and the kid was he was there, but he was not there. He was drooling. He was not engaged in any of the schoolwork. The teachers, you know, kind of shrugged their shoulders like, yeah, he's a special needs kid. We do what we can. But that advocate was not going to let that happen. He decided to go look up the child's medical records, and he found the laundry list of medications that this child was on. Now, he wasn't a doctor, but he called up a doctor friend and said, hey, if a kid was on some of these medications, like, should he be a little sleepy? The doctor friend said, no, he should be passed out. This is more medication than an adult should be taking. So that advocate went to work talking to the foster parents, the case manager, the judge, and really fought to get this kid off of as many medications as possible. It worked, and now the child is doing very well in a gifted program in a school in Phoenix. So it just took that one person really paying attention to what was going on in that kid's life and doing the research to make a difference for him.
Yeah, that's a big pet peeve of mine. I mean, I've been looking at my patients' health records for 30 years. Mm-hmm. And let's just take the retirees. The people who retired Ahwatukee and they're on 5 different prescriptions, they're usually not there in 10 years. And the guy who comes down at 65 and he's not on any prescriptions, they're still there at like 95. Right. And when you say that, people say, shut up, you don't know, you're not a doctor, you're a dentist, blah, blah, blah. America has 5% of the world's population. There's 7.5 billion people. Only 322 million of them live here. Mm-hmm. So we're 1 out of 20 people, and we take half the prescription pills. Yeah. Now, without saying anything else, would that make you think maybe Americans take too many prescription pills?
Yeah, and it's actually higher among children in foster care as well.
Ah.
Because so many of them, they're ripped from everything they know and put into homes with strangers, basically, or shelters where there's just staff coming in and out of their lives. And so, they might show signs of being depressed, and so someone will give them something for depression. Well, that might make them sleepy, so they get something to keep them awake. Well, that makes them too hyper, so then they get something to keep them quiet. There's all these pills to really treat what is just a bad situation.
You just watch the news on cable TV. Just sit down and watch the news on Sunday. The first half of the hour program, all the commercials are all these prescription drugs. And the last part of each one of those commercials is, this may kill you, cause bleeding, liver failure, die, blah. Mm-hmm. And then the second half of the hour is all these legal malpractice forms saying, were you hurt by these pills? Call the law firm of, and it's like, my God, it's crazy. Mm-hmm. And there's two mindsets in Ahwatukee. You tell one person you got high blood pressure. You tell two people they got high blood pressure. One says, well, give me a pill. The other one says, I know. I need to eat less. I need to move more. I need to quit snack. I need to take a lunch instead of going to Arby's. I know what I need to do. So some just say, forget it. I'm just going to take a pill. Mm-hmm. The other half say, well, if I got high blood pressure, I'm gonna move more and eat less. And bottom line, that's all the diets. I mean, after 55 years, there's more fad diets than there are outfits by movie stars. I mean, there's 100 fad diets, and they all come down to one thing: you got to eat less and move more. And the people who try to get healthier by cleaning up their diet and exercising more, they seem to live really, really long in Ahwatukee. Mm-hmm. And the ones that says, I'm not changing. I can't eat anything without bacon. I'll just take a pill. And I know everything is better with bacon. I mean, you can take a horrible salad, just add bacon. You can take a horrible sandwich, just add bacon. I mean, I know bacon fixes everything, but when it comes to where you got to start taking a pill, you should probably stop eating bacon. I think what you're doing is cool. So how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing it for 2 years since I left Ahwatukee Foothills News.
So you're with the Ahwatukee Foothills News 5 years, so you know Tukey.
I do. I feel like an expert on Tukey. Well, I was 2 years ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're the Ahwatukee Foothills News, and we had their senior editor on yesterday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Paul Mariniak. You remember him?
He came after I left.
Oh, what an amazing man.
But I worked for him, for about a week at the Arizona Republic when I interned there.
All right. So what if your life in Ahwatukee is a bedroom community? What if you work downtown, and when you come home, you got to let your car door opener, you go in your garage. You really don't get out in Ahwatukee. What did you think Ahwatukee was like 5 years being a journalist? And you have a degree from journalism from ASU. What's your thoughts of Ahwatukee? I mean, what?
I love Ahwatukee. It's such like a small town feel in the middle of big cities all around it. It seems like everyone knows each other in Ahwatukee. Everyone's committed to something. Everyone's involved with their community. It's a great place to live. And where do you actually live? I actually live in Mesa. Mesa. A little more affordable out there. A little more affordable out there? Well, Ahwatukee, even that's a lot of misnomer. I mean, there's a lot of houses within a mile of my dental office that are only $100,000. There's houses, I mean, there's apartment of it. A lot of people think it's a rich area, but it's really mixed housing. I mean, there's $150,000, 1,200 square foot homes. There's all. I sometimes when I've had friends that are dentists from other parts of the area, and they tell me something about Ahwatukee, and then when we're going to the restaurant or whatever, I drive around different sides. They said, I've never seen this side of Ahwatukee, but it's a very diverse community. It is, yeah, very diverse. So what did you report on? What subjects did you report on in Ahwatukee Foothills News? I started out doing crime. And let's start there. Is Ahwatukee a safer community than, say, Chandler and Mesa and Gilbert and Scottsdale and Phoenix? It is. I mean, it's a smaller area, but yeah, there is less crime in Ahwatukee. And why do you think there's less crime in Ahwatukee? I'm not sure. It is a slightly wealthier community than... So back to who's in jail. They didn't finish high school. They have substance abuse. They live below the poverty line. So desperate people do desperate things. Mm-hmm. Drunk people are crazier than sober people. Yeah. But
My patients that are police officers, you know what they always said a big reason was? They said that if I'm going to rob a bank, I want to rob that bank and be on an interstate going 70 miles an hour in a minute. Mm-hmm. And the problem with Ahwatukee for a criminal is that there's only 4 ways in here. Uh-huh. Elliott, Warner, Ray, and Chandler. And they said most of the crime is done and I can get on the freeway in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But by the time you get back to like the end of the foothills, hell, if you robbed a bank, you might even get lost.
Yeah.
You know, you might be driving around and you might have to knock on someone's door and say, I just robbed a bank. How the hell do I get back to I-10?
So when there is crime in Ahwatukee, it's very close to I-10.
Exactly, which is what kind of scares me about the 202 wrapping around.
Right.
Because now we just had 4 doors to get in here on the east side. Mm-hmm. Now we got 3 doors on the south side. Mm-hmm. And I've heard government people for 30 years talking about wanting to dig a tunnel from Central under South Mountain.
Right.
So then then we go from 4 doors on the east side, add 3 on the south. There could be 1 on the north. So that's it's changing. It's going to change the flavor.
It is, yeah.
Do you think it'll change it a lot or just a little?
I feel like it's already changed it a lot. I mean, just all the houses that were destroyed to make way for the 202. I can't imagine how that's impacting those neighbors who live right there. I wrote about an HOA that went from, 100 houses to like 3. And how they were going to deal with that impact.
Why do you think they didn't just put it on the Indian reservation?
Because the Indian reservation is very difficult to work with. A lot of that land is privately owned, and it was difficult to get all of those landowners together to agree on where to put it.
It just seems bizarre because you would have to think they're good neighbors because, like, you give the Indian reservation the only license to have a casino. You can't have a casino in Arizona.
Right.
In Ahwatukee.
But the main reason for not putting it on the reservation, the main, discussion that was coming off of the reservation was South Mountain is sacred and their land is sacred and they want to keep it that way. They don't want this highway going through there. They don't want all this development out there. They want to keep it the way it is.
And you know what's really strange is I know America thinks they're the greatest country in the world. You hear it all the time. But I've gone to dental conventions in 50 countries because my favorite thing with the boys was wrestling all through high school and travel. We just like vacations. We love the travel. And Australia is the smartest one. They build their freeways underground. So when they want to run across Sydney, America removes houses and all that. And Australia just does a tunnel. And now Elon Musk is starting the first one in LA. Did you read about that?
I did not.
Yeah, he's built the same thing they've been doing in Australia for decades. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure every American will think we invented it. And, and what's neat is like, say Sydney wants the airport there. Well, it's straight as the crow flies. And when Elon Musk, when they're tunneling, all they have to do is go down 50 feet. And when they're tunneling like under your house, there's no scientific measurements to feel or hear. You cannot tell. And I think it's auguring out 95,000 tons of dirt a week. So it's just slowly crawling along, and it'll be a 2-lane. And in Australia, I just think that's just so smart. And Phoenix did it in that one area. Remember downtown? No. Downtown, there's the freeway goes under a park.
Oh, park, yeah.
I mean, that's we did it. How long is that? A couple hundred yards, 2 football fields or something.
Not very long.
But yeah, that's a whole nother option that I don't. I wish. And some of those older cities in Europe are going to have to do that because it's one thing tearing down 20-year-old churches and houses, mm-hmm. but you go to a town like London, Paris. I mean, they'd have to tear down 1,000-year-old cathedrals,
right? Yeah.
Not a 20-year-old Pecos Park church,
Right. Yeah.
And so I think tunneling will be the future. So we talked about crime. We talked about the 202, which is kind of related to crime. It's going to increase the crime. What other subjects did you report on?
I reported on everything. When I left, I was the only reporter left. So, besides sports.
What do you mean when you left? You're the only reporter left because the paper's getting smaller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which
is a trend for the last 20 years, ever since the internet takeoff.
Yep.
So what do you think about that? What's the I remember when I got here 30 years ago, you could barely pick up a Sunday paper. I mean, it was a log. It was literally a log.
Yeah.
And it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as all those ads are moving on to your smartphone, right?
Right, yeah.
So what do you think the future is for the Ahwatukee Fidel's paper or the Arizona Republic or newspapers in general? I mean, you're just 28. When you're as old and as I am, and when you're a grandpa or a grandma, where do you think the newspapers will be?
I think they will move more to online. I'm someone who still prefers to have a physical paper in front of me to read it, but I think everything's headed towards digital, being available on apps and online, and that's just where it's headed.
I'm with you. I've been given gifts from my family, staff, the Kindle, the iPad. I want to hold a book in my rocking chair, and I want to be able to highlight it or write a note, or I can't do that.
I think there's still always going to be a place for journalists, because I think there's always going to be a need for those more in-depth stories that people want to read, but I think everything eventually will head
Well, the goal for me with Tukeetown is that as these newspapers started shrinking, they have to lay off reporters. Mm-hmm. And then, what news they do, this is the trend I watch. What the news does, it's the same, started with TVs. When I was little, the shows were high overhead. They were Big Valley and Bonanza. You probably never even heard of those, have you?
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Have you ever seen a show?
No.
Okay. How about Gilligan's Island?
Yes.
Or the Brady Bunch? Did you see any of those shows?
Yeah.
So those had writers and actors and sets and all this stuff like that. But as advertising rates came down, Merv Griffin came along and said, we don't have money for that. We're just going to go to a one-person game show, Jeopardy or the Wheel of Fortune, or a lot of talk shows. You just have like Jimmy Fallon. You just have one guy. You don't have any writers and actors and sets and all this stuff. And that's really what happened to news too. So I don't have the money. I don't have all this massive advertising in the paper to have all these journalists crawling around Ahwatukee. So the news is all focused on national and international. They just only want to talk about Trump and Hillary and Putin and ISIS and North Korea because no one's covering Desert Vista and Mountain Point High School and what's going on in your own area. So the new model has got to be user-generated news. So what I'm hoping is that you're going to the city council meeting. You got an iPhone if you're cool. If you're not cool, you have a Samsung. I just want to make that point very clear. No, I'm just kidding. So you're at the city council. You filmed this. Just like you're watching this, you can upload the video.
Have you ever been to a city council meeting? Mm-hmm. They're not very exciting.
Yeah, you need to learn how to edit
on their free time.
Yeah, but let's say there's a Desert Vista meeting or something's going on, or something. Some issues really bother me. One issue that I don't want to repeat too many times because I don't want to annoy people, but it's really made me mad in the last 30 years that anytime a doctor has a patient die in the office, they're in big trouble. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they lose their license and no longer can deal. Sometimes, like maybe they didn't write it up after someone and died and wrote it up wrong in the chart and got criminal charges. We kill. No one's ever died in my office. But man, when someone dies in a doctor's office, it's a deal ender. Yeah. Yet the Arizona Department of Transportation builds these 4-lane intersections where they know, and journalists have done parts like these are the 10 deadliest intersections, mm-hmm. and a lot of them kill like one person a month. But they know if they didn't put something on all 4 corners, they just put something on 2 sides, and the other 2 sides were say apartments or condos or housing, you don't have the death problem. Right. And so then I said there's one intersection in Arizona, I mean in Ahwatukee, 48th and Ray. Mm-hmm. And I wish every time there was a car wreck, I wish we'd start a thread under traffic, and every time you see a car wreck, post it. And I mean, so let's just say someone died every month there. Well, does someone have to die every month there till the end of time? I mean, is there a solution? Especially with all these businesses going out and a lot of these available. I mean, mm-hmm. could a city sit there and say, you know what, we're going to condemn one of those corners or 2 of those corners, or change the structure. Maybe you need a full-time cop there to maybe take out the lights and have a human director. I don't know, but I know that 1 death a month doesn't sound like a lot, until it's your child or your mom. It's kind of like if you're unemployed. If you're unemployed, it's a depression. If you're employed but there's 5% unemployment, it's not an issue. It's not an issue till you lose your job and you can't find a job. Then it's bad. But I just wish there was a more tool where we could, instead of just saying, like in my generation, you talk to your 55-year-old dentist friends, especially if they're Italian, they're like, hey, it is what it is. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? It's like, well, with apps and smartphones, I mean, when I was little, that phone was nailed to a wall. I never even thought it'd come off the wall, let alone that I could take it off the wall and take a picture of it and then text it to my Uncle Eddie. I mean, so they call it a smartphone. I'm hoping a smartphone can make Ahwatukee smarter. What other big impressions Ahwatukee have? Do you think Ahwatukee likes their school system?
Yes, I think Ahwatukee's got a great school system. The Kyrene School District is really great. I feel like they're very transparent with the community. They do a really good job of holding meetings where it is open to the community to come in and talk.
I'll tell you, the only complaint I've ever heard about Kyrene. You want to hear it?
Uh-huh.
Nobody can remember the name of any of the schools.
Really?
Which school do you go? Oh my God, it's De La Hossa, Kyrene, something. My kid's gone there 4 years and I still don't know the name of it.
They all have nicknames for them too.
Do they?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They shorten them down to.
Yeah, the high schools you can name it's Desert Vista and Mountain Point,
Right.
but it goes to zero. It goes to zero after that. But yeah, I've heard nothing but great things about Kyrene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone that's come on the show, and I said, what about Kyrene? The guy from Hurtado loved the school district. I mean, you hear great things. What I think is bizarre about the school is I grew up in Kansas. My high school in Wichita, Kansas, seriously, it looked like the largest barn you've ever seen. And then when you go to Desert Vista and Mountain Point, I mean, I felt like I went to like the richest country I've never seen. And then I went to college in Omaha at Creighton University. Mm-hmm. Desert Vista and Mountain Point are nicer with more amenities than my college. I mean, those are some nice. If you're going to Desert Point or Mountain Vista and you think the school doesn't look nice or it doesn't have all that, you're out of your mind. I mean, really.
Yeah, and I mean, if students are not taking advantage of all the extracurriculars they offer at those schools, they're missing out.
So then, besides crime, besides 202, besides school, what are other big subjects that you kind of felt strong impressions on?
I don't know that I like to bring it up, but Save the Lakes. I mean, the whole lakes issue was.
I can't get anybody to come on the show and talk about it. Do you have it? Well, they put up these signs, so you call the number and there's nothing there.
Save the Lakes signs?
Yeah.
Oh.
So,
interesting.
But do you have anybody that really knows that issue that will come in and explain it and talk about it?
Probably.
I would love that because the developers, they sure as hell don't want to come talk. They, I mean, we've sent emails and phone calls and all that, and it's like, but yeah. So what are your thoughts about? So what that is? There used to be 4 golf courses. There's Foothills East. They call it Foothills East and West, or just Foothills and Foothills West?
Foothills, Club West.
Foothills and Club West.
The lakes.
And then you had the Ahwatukee Country Club and the Ahwatukee Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ahwatukee Lakes was an executive course. It was a shorter course.
Right.
With a bunch of lakes, and then what happened?
And then they shut it down. It wasn't making any money, so they shut it down. They kind of let it go to the wayside. I mean, grass was growing, weeds were growing into trees, and they just didn't take care of it and then tried to sell it. They did sell it, but they've only been able to sell it to developers, and developers can't develop it until the CC&Rs on the land change. And the neighborhood will not let that happen.
I imagine it must be very depressing to retire on a golf course. The next thing you know, the golf course is weeds.
Right.
And the next thing you hear, they want to build apartment complexes or condos.
Right.
So you're going to be sitting out with your lawn chair looking at a golf course on one day. The next day you'll be looking at an apartment complex.
I mean, they paid a premium to live on this golf course.
But that was a bad business
view.
model because if you buy a car or a refrigerator, it has, even people ask me, they say, well, will this Crown will this feeling last forever? Dude, you won't last forever. Okay, let me. Where do I? You're gonna die someday. 100 billion humans have died, but you are gonna live forever with your feeling. So if you pay a premium golf course, that's not a business model.
Yeah.
I mean, that wouldn't pass Shark Tank. I mean, you ever watch Shark Tank?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Wonderful would say, okay, so I buy this slot in 87. Well, how do I still have money in 97 or 2007 or 2017? So the business model was flawed. They bought, as opposed to if they would have not paid a premium lot, but had monthly dues. Let's say that, every month, every house will pay $200 in perpetuity till the end of time.
Yeah.
That's what business model Mr. Wonderful. He's my favorite Shark Tank guy because he's bald. Right? I mean, you don't like men with hair, right? You don't like Mark Cuban with all that nappy hair on his head.
Yeah.
So their business model wouldn't pass Shark Tank, and it obviously didn't work.
Right. It didn't because, the golf industry is just...
And they could have, at the time, still changed the business model. They could have all got together and said, look, this is not going to end well. Why don't we all change the CC&Rs to pay a monthly HOA fee to keep this golf course alive? But no one wanted to pay money, and now they're sad that it's bankrupt and weeds.
Yeah.
And so what's going to happen now? Do you think? What do you think the end game will be?
I think eventually it'll be developed, but I'm not sure how. There's very angry neighbors who want their golf course, and then there's these developers who say, we can't do anything with it except build houses. And I think we've had 2 developers come out with 2 different plans that are both great plans.
And who are the 2 developers? Is one like...
one was Pulte.
One was Pulte.
They tried for a while, and then they gave up. I'm not sure who the current
was
one
it
is.
G? Was it...
Wilson G was the owner of the course who sold it.
Wilson G was the owner. They sold it. Pulte looked at it and passed. Or did they buy it?
I mean, they had a plan. They took it out to the community. They held meetings where people could come out and look at it. And they were going to build, I think, 300 homes or something. But very nice homes, give lots of space in between the current neighborhood and the new neighborhood. And they just couldn't get the signatures that they needed to make the change. And so they pulled out. And I'm not sure who the current one is. They want to build a farm and a school.
So basically, what'll probably happen, they just have to, they haven't hit rock bottom yet.
Right.
It's like when your Uncle Eddie won't quit drinking. It's like, okay, dude, you're in an elevator and you're going down. And you have to lose your wife. You have to lose your job. You have to lose your freedom and go to jail. You have to overdose. How far down does the elevator have to go before you die? So they are still holding on to some mythical unicorn. So they're going to have to hit. They haven't hit rock bottom yet. And one of the rock bottoms is going to be, I want to sell my house. And then they start saying that, no, it's really hard to sell a house when there's all these weeds and no one knows what's going to be the future.
Dirt in the backyard, yeah.
And that was when, and I have to admit, everybody down in the foothills, I mean, I was here 30 years. I was here before there was a golf course there. Mm-hmm. And they had laid out the plans for the 202. When I got here in 87, it was already laid out.
Right.
And the reason I never kept up on it, because it was always going to be, well, we're not going to break ground until next year. That was like 87.
Yeah.
Oh, we pushed it back 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'd have the audacity to push it back like 14 months. I'm like, 14 months? It's not going to happen. Who came up with 14? As opposed to just a year. So I eventually quit listening to the deal because I didn't think it ever happened, and it literally took 30 years. Mm-hmm. I can't believe I lived so long. I'm actually seeing the 202 break ground. So eventually they're going to have houses that are illiquid assets that can't be sold. Mm-hmm. And then, so basically they haven't lost their dreams yet.
Right.
So their dreams have not been completely crushed, and they haven't hit rock bottom to where they say, something has got to be better than this.
Yeah, I mean, they're still hearing from some expert somewhere that it could still be a golf course if we, find just the right buyer.
Well,
they're still holding on to that.
The problem with the golf course is, since I've been here 30 years ago, do you know how many new golf courses they've built? I mean, it's supply and demand. I think, what does Maricopa County have, like 300 golf courses? Ryan, Google how many golf courses does Maricopa County have? Maricopa has 220 golf courses. How many times a year do you golf?
0. I've never been in my
Ryan, how many times a year do you golf?
0.
0. Me, 0. So you have 220 golf courses. and not everyone golfs. And it's a supply and demand issue. There's too many golf courses, and I don't think any of the other golf courses are going to come to your rescue and try to keep. It's like Burger King's not going to bail out McDonald's and Whataburger.
Right.
So well, let me ask you this: do you think there's enough demand for golfers in Ahwatukee to support a fourth golf course?
No, because Ahwatukee has 4 golf courses, and all of them are in the same boat where they're all struggling.
Exactly, and Club West is really struggling.
I don't know if that one's sold yet, but it was up for sale when
Yeah.
I left.
So again, if you live on the Ahwatukee Lakes, you had 4. One went bankrupt. If you're thinking about bringing that one back to life, God, the other 3 are on life support.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a tough issue. Again, what I love about Tukeetown is a lot of people, a newspaper just comes at you, a billboard you just drive by, but a lot of people feel helpless or powerless or what do I do? And I'm hoping something like Tukeetown, like you couldn't get all the votes, like they came out and give a meeting. Well, maybe you're at work. Maybe you didn't know the meeting was there. Maybe your daughter it was her birthday or baptism or Hanukkah or whatever. And I'm hoping since everybody has a smartphone, and then it's not this endless crazy news feed like email groups or Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, where every time you open up just another million random posts, that somebody where this is a burning issue could just sit there and open up Tukeetown, go right to the golf course deal, see what the stat, and then hopefully Tukeetown will make people make faster, easier, higher quality decisions for no cost. Do you think I got a chance at that goal, or do you think I'm completely insane?
No, I think you've got a chance at it.
Because I have 4 children,
I think
they've
the
all
community of
unanimously.
Ahwatukee is perfect for that.
Yeah, and
Because people care.
Yeah, people care, and they're very highly educated.
Yeah.
If you walked out of Desert Vista and Mountain Point, you know how to work a smartphone and mess with. You know what's funny about? I'll tell you something that'll blow your mind. When I was your age, okay, so I got out of dental school with still no computer. And when they started launching the computer, you know why everybody said it wouldn't work? And people forget this. Because no men typed, and only some girls took typing in high school. Mm-hmm. And when everybody said, well, this computer, well, how's it going to work? Well, you're going to have to type. Well, that's dead on arrival. I don't type, and I'm not going to type, and I'm never going to type. And I remember back then so many people said, well, I'm not going to type that. And then what was the funniest thing is when Windows and Microsoft and the Intel 186 and then the 280, when it started taking off, a lot of seniors in the deal, I say, well, do you think you'll get on the computer? Well, my wife's always done all the typing. I'm not a typer. And I thought it was so interesting how they viewed that whole personal computer as some weird typing machine. And I can give you the names of 20 grandpas that never touched the computer ever because they couldn't get over that typing thing.
Right.
And they said, yeah, we owned our own farm in Iowa, and Doris, she did all the typing and paid all the bills. I did all the agriculture. I did all the farming in the sea, but she did all that stuff, and I'm not a typer. It's like, man, a lot of change. Really have so much respect for you for doing this. Talk about having a job with purpose or passion. Think about your job versus some poor guy who has to go to an assembly line and all he does all day is put bolt number 12 and hole number 3 and just does it all day long. And you're not on an assembly line assembling, a widget. You're out there changing people's lives. And I just want to tell you, I have so much respect for you, and thank you so much for coming on the show today and talking to everyone in Ahwatukee. And good luck to your very purposeful mission.
Thank you.